Hello, everyone. On this episode of Life Discussions, I'm going to be talking about my time as a film student in Sydney at an institution called the Academy of Film, Theatre and Television back in 2019, which has since been merged into its parent company, JMC Academy. I'm going to talk about all the highs, lows, and all the crazy things that I had to put myself through just to get a degree that I ultimately did nothing with, and soon enough you'll know and understand why. Some of this video will feature some strong but fair criticisms of certain individuals. However, out of respect for them, I will leave them unnamed and only mention people by name who I want to put over. So, my journey began at the start of 2019. After floundering and failing big time in my life due to severe mental illness that I had to overcome, I had made the decision that I was going to attempt to study something in the hope of regaining employment for the first time since 2007. I saw the ad for AFTT on Google and thought that filming could be something that I would enjoy. Plus, I had some previous experience with the media studies I did at TAFE back in 2016. I got to contact with one of the administration members at the time, a beautiful young lady by the name of Renee. She really went out of her way to get me into this film school, which wasn't that easy because of my previous study that I did and the previous student loan that I had to take out for that as well, as ludicrous as that might sound. But she somehow managed to find me a way to get me accepted, and all I needed to do was have an interview with the head of film at the time, a great man by the name of Woody Naismith, who actually has experience of working on films in Los Angeles. The interview went really well. The only thing he was concerned about for me was the fact that I lived 2 hours away and this was a full-time course, but I assured him that I was more than able to make this work, which I did. I think that during my entire year there, I was only late to class one time due to missing my train because of trouble sleeping that night before. So at the time, I'm 28 years old, close to 29, and with the exception of one guy who was already in his 30s, the whole class of people that I'm with are all fresh out of high school. So, from the very first class assignment of having to work together to recreate a set from a film and shoot, it was a tough ask from the beginning. I mean, they're all really nice people. It's just, I was in a completely different mindset from all these kids that were just out of school. My mindset was, I have to be focused 100% of the time. I want to show my appreciation to all my teachers that I was actually accepted into a school like this through all my efforts and hard work. And I wanted to fight as hard as I could for my future, especially as someone who hadn't been employed since 2007. And I wanted to help bring everyone else up with me through all of our collective efforts and constant pushing to work harder. Whereas almost everyone else didn't have that mindset. Most of them were fresh out of school, as I said, many still figuring out either what they wanted to do or were just there to primarily have fun, which is fine to a certain level, but not if you want to actually get hired by anyone in the film industry. So the very first assignment we did, I began to panic and I got frustrated at one of my classmates for being late back from break, and I actually yelled at him, which I later apologised for because he was a super nice guy and still is, and looking back now, I know that I shouldn't have done that. There were other times where I just couldn't hold back my frustration at certain other things. Either, for instance, on one of the film shoots I was on, the characters' names were Peter and Wendy, which I later found out were literally only named those names because it was just to copy the last person who had also used those names. So that right there and then told me that that person was too lazy and uncreative to come up with something different. See, the thing is, I have no problem with anything being bad. Shit happens, man. What I have a problem with are people who have a lack of effort. In fact, I would say that most of the things that I did, including my short film, were pretty bad, but I had legitimate reasons for literally everything that I did. And while most things were not executed the way that I wanted them to be, I was always happy that at least I tried to work hard and tried to be different to everybody else. And because I had this overwhelming passion to succeed and turn my life around after so many failures, mental problems, and even excuses that had plagued me for many years, sometimes I did lash out at others because I wanted them to work as hard as I was. Especially because it eventually got to the point where I actually was having to sleep outside on the streets and on a nearby rooftop opposite the campus using my bag as a pillow just to get by. At the time, my family car was on its way out and I was having to walk 5 hours total from my house to the train station and back after the trip to Sydney just to be there, whereas almost everyone else was close enough to get to the campus much easier. And on top of that, the only money I was getting were these weak-ass, piddly little fortnightly student allowance payments, so I couldn't afford much to eat or drink at a time, and certainly could not afford to stay at a hotel. And I had to help look after my mum back home who was unable to work, whereas everyone else in their homes were either with one or both of their parents that worked. Plus, I had too much pride to ask to stay at anyone else's house because I feel like that they shouldn't have had to take me in because I felt like that I wasn't their responsibility. So, in all honesty, as much as I don't like to say this, I had pretty much everything that could go against me in this journey. And one of the other things I tried to do when it was cold outside after class was stay at the nearby 24-hour sports bar. The problem with that was it was impossible to get any sleep there because they didn't allow people to actually sleep there. So I had to stay awake literally all night with no sleep and then go to class the day after. The longest I went without sleep was 36 straight hours, which was insane. I was barely able to hold myself up during class when that happened, and everyone else could see that, and most knew what I was going through just to be there. So to avoid having to walk home for so long or stay up without any sleep, I decided the easiest thing to do was to find somewhere to sleep outside, be it a street corner, pavement, or sidewalk as Americans call it, or the rooftop that I was able to sneak up on. I also slept inside the front of one of the restaurants at the Rocks near the Sydney Harbour Bridge. A security guard actually found me while I was hiding, trying to go to sleep, and when he found me, I explained my situation to him and he let me go without any trouble being caused, so that was nice. So I carried on, and week by week, I was starting to get a little bit more confident with the work I was doing. I want to say that literally all the teachers that I had were all amazing, and they all had industry experience as well, so they weren't just teachers, they were all actual filmmakers themselves. As far as us students were concerned, we all began to find what we were good at as well, and I generally favoured editing, sound recording, and script writing. Casting actors for our films was something that we all had to do via the Star Now service, and I had the privilege of meeting several great people who all took great interest in my project. One guy was actually a tennis coach, who I was seriously considering for the part of my main villain because I loved what he did in the audition so much, but out of respect for his schedule, I turned him down because I didn't want him to have to turn down paid work in order to volunteer for free on my project. And I was lucky enough to find actor Max Belmont for the same role, and he happened to be more available and didn't have to turn down work for me, so that's why I went with him. But both guys were absolutely amazing. And to fill in the role of one of my other villains, I decided to play the role myself because admittedly it was very hard trying to find someone else for it. And unfortunately, the problem with a lot of AFTT actors were that they were often not willing to take part in our productions because of other things they had going on, which was a shame. However, I can say that on the first production I was a part of on campus, an amazing girl by the name of Shireen and a great man by the name of Deng, who were both actors there, were more than willing to help us out when we needed them. Both of them were also extremely kind and welcoming to me throughout my entire time there. Towards the end of the year, we all had to take turns in doing different roles, shooting on everyone's films. Now, while this was a generally favourable experience for me, it certainly didn't start out that way. Here's why. Because most of the films that were being shot were at the person's house, and even though admittedly it did go well for some, I was never in favour of doing that for two reasons. Number one, I found that it was just an unoriginal, easy fix most of the time for those who were either unsuccessful in doing so or just couldn't be bothered looking for a proper location. And number two, there were usually too many distractions at other people's homes. I was having to travel even further to go out of my way to places that I'd never been before within Sydney, and I really enjoyed that experience, even if it was tough getting back home. The toughest part of all this happened on the second shoot, which was extremely disorganised and not very well thought out or planned ahead of time. By this point, my passionate attitude of wanting to get things done right was really rubbing almost everyone the wrong way, and they all started to turn on me. To make matters worse, I was starting to come down with the flu, and I was stuck in the rain trying to protect the camera while everyone else was trying to figure out what we would be doing next, which again, should have been figured out well ahead of time. It would actually end up being the worst illness I ever had in my life besides food poisoning at 6 years old. When I got back home, I went straight to my room, and other than to brush my teeth, which I barely remember doing, I didn't get up or eat any solid food for 4 straight days. I was very lucky I didn't have to go to hospital. Now, thankfully, this person and the family were all kind enough to let us stay over their house, and I finally didn't have to sleep outside for once, and they cooked a big feast for everyone. But unfortunately, I was way too ill to eat any of it. So I went and laid down on the mattress that they gave me while everyone else ate. I actually pretended to be asleep just so that I could listen to some of the conversations that were going on, and everyone, with the exception of 2 other people, absolutely buried me. One person went as far as to say that he didn't want me on his shoot later that week, and also said that he didn't want me in his car again to drop me off at the train station because of when I told him to slow down earlier on that week after going about 30 kilometers over the limit and coming close to hitting an old lady, which of course he conveniently left that part out. And also, I never actually asked to be dropped off anywhere one single time by anybody, which made that statement doubly hilarious. But I told myself that I would hold it together like a professional. So I let them talk all the crap they wanted about me before I finally went to sleep, finished the rest of the filming the next day, and then absolutely ripped the person to shreds over what he said. But I did it in a real respectable manner, without any insults, without even calling him out on his extremely bad habit of actually falling asleep on set. Yes, that actually happened a lot with this guy. He began to backpedal so badly when I called him out on him saying he didn't want me out on his set in particular, to which he denied, but I admitted to pretending to be asleep to hear all the petty conversations they had about me. So then I said, alright, if you don't want me on your set, then we'll go about this the right way, not like high school children. When we get back to campus, we'll go to Woody, the head of film's office, we'll get Kim, the head of production, and we'll sit down and settle this the right way, and if they want to remove me from your set, they can. Well, he did not want that at all. He was more than okay to allow me to lay down in another room and talk all this nonsense behind my back, but face to face, he showed just how gutless and pathetic he really was. But me being the nice guy that I am, I didn't hold it against him. And we actually didn't end up working together on his set because he ended up doing his project in a different way that didn't require as many people anyway, so it was fine. So he actually did say to me that he wanted to save me the hassle of my traveling, and I respected that. So that was good. And I was okay with that too because I was still so ill at that point. I was immensely proud of the way I handled myself both those days. At the start of the second day, I put myself onto continuity away from the camera just so that I could be away from everyone else and not risk making them sick like I was. However, I also want to add that a great guy I had the privilege of meeting and working during my time there by the name of Luke, who is still very much involved in filming and who is one of the absolute funniest and most creative people I've ever met in my life, actually pulled me aside and told me that I had made a couple of others cry, which I did feel legitimately bad about and sorry for, because my goal was to never attack anyone personally or bring them down, and that he understood where I was coming from, but that my strong passion was putting too much pressure on others. And I told him how much I appreciated him for being honest with me, which I still do and always appreciate. He was one of the only few people who didn't bury me behind my back like everyone else did. He also said to me that he understood that I had a stronger desire to do more and get things done than those who were fresh out of high school, and that we had different mindsets. Luke, who was only 19 at the time, showed me that day just how wise he was, on top of being constantly hilarious and full of fun, wacky ideas that I loved. Luke, if you're listening to this, I just want you to know that I will always appreciate you giving me the honesty that I know I needed that day. Thank you very much, man. So when we got back to debrief everything, we all sat down, and mostly everyone began to criticize me and the way I would get angry over certain things, such as lack of organization or structure with a lot of these film sets, which they left out. And I'm never going to apologize for that. But, however, I will admit that it was wrong for me to react in the ways that I did. Even though I know that I never personally attacked anybody, it was more the way I delivered my words and carried myself, and I know I should have been far better than I was. I apologized to everyone in the room for that and made everyone laugh by actually saying, I got punished by getting the flu for the way I treated you all. Don't worry, I got exactly what I deserved. And I honestly felt that way, as crazy as that sounds. This, combined with the talk that I had with Luke, really changed my attitude for the better, I feel. Because I went from my film and everyone else's has to be the best that it can be to now only my film has to be the best that it can be, because if anyone else doesn't want to put in that same effort, then that's their choice, man. I'm not going to try to force what's not there anymore, and it was a wake-up call that I needed. And in fact, when I went on the next set, everyone actually commented on me and said that I was much different and much better to be around, and I was happy to hear that, because I didn't want to be against anybody. I just wanted things to be done the best that they could, and I wanted us all to be able to gain work, and I just felt that that wasn't going to happen with the way certain people went about things. That's literally all it was. I never hated anybody. Not even the guy who really put me down when I pretended to be asleep. And I wish him all the best too. I wish everyone the best with what they're doing now after film school. Anyway, as far as my film, titled It Pays to Be Pleasant, went, it was shot over 2 days at the Adena Hotel in Sydney. For the most part, everyone worked really well, and I had an absolute blast directing my two actors, Max and Patsy. Max in particular gave me the really funny, aggressive actions I was after, and Luke, who was kind enough to stay as another character I needed when I couldn't get anyone else, did an absolutely amazing job and successfully made me laugh so hard that I actually could not speak. It was tremendous, man. And I found myself constantly going to him for camera ideas because even though he wasn't actually working the camera that day, in my opinion, and this is absolutely nothing personal against the person who was, Luke kept giving me the best ideas that I was after, so naturally, of course, I was going to keep going to him. The only real issue with my film was I had so many crazy ideas to cram into a short film with only 2 days of filming that I had to cut a lot of stuff out that would have made the film a hell of a lot more easier to understand and make a lot more sense than what it ended up making in the end. But during the screening, I can take a lot of happiness and pride in the fact that I successfully managed to make a whole room full of people laugh, even if it was at my stupidity. That's okay. And honestly, I'd rather get that reaction than nothing at all. Now, by this time, I'd actually been friends with Eva Longoria for 5 years and was very fortunate enough to be able to stay in contact with her regularly. And later that year, she would actually send me a very generous gift that helped me out with expenses that I had in relation to my studies, which she did not have to do at all, but she did because she's incredible. Anyway, out of the kindness of her heart, Eva actually offered to also pay for me to stay at a hotel while I was doing all my studies, and I politely declined because I felt like that, especially with everything she had going on with her busy life, I shouldn't have to be her responsibility to look after. And in my opinion, Eva is the hardest working person in all of Hollywood, the most generous and greatest friend I've ever had, and the single greatest performer, entertainer, director, philanthropist that I've ever seen in my life. And again, she shouldn't be expected to do anything for someone so insignificant like me. But I told her when we met, literally the only thing I want from her is to be able to stay in contact, whether it be messaging, phone calls, just stay in contact. That's it. And I feel that's why our friendship is so strong, because I've proven to her and to myself that in a world where so many people take from others without any shame whatsoever, that I could be someone who would never take advantage of what they have, because I value friendship so much more than any amount of dollars in the world. So that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to all of this. If you did, I want to send special thanks in particular to Luke, Masashi, Baz, Kerrod, Emily, Zarina, Dion, Simone, both Connors, Amy, Kim, Woody, Glenn, Renee, Courtney, Jessica, and anyone else who I may have missed, who all put up with me, who all helped give me guidance on how to be better, both as a person and as a filmmaker at the time, and for helping make this experience one of the greatest I ever had, even if it was also one of the toughest for many reasons. You're all awesome, and even though I'm no longer involved in filming, I appreciate everything that you all did to help get as much as I could out of it. And to those of you who are still involved in filming, even if you didn't like me, I wish you all the very best with everything, and that's the truth. Take care, everyone.